The Flames and the Claims, the story of black metal.
During the next 60 minutes, you'll hear some strongly expressed views which you may find offensive. If this concerns you, then please switch off. But remember to tune in again at 8 o'clock when John Kavanagh will be presenting 2 hours of highlights of yesterday's Donington Rock Festival. But now, welcome to The Flames and the Claims, the story of black metal.
Obviously, we don't agree with this kind of thing. I mean, this is probably the most horrific story in the history of heavy metal.
This new breed of black metal, they are exciting, and I think a lot of kids are just attracted to that because they want always to be more and more extreme.
Fear is failure.
Evil is about murder. Evil is about the rape of people's lives and their emotions.
The guy I killed intended to kill me, so I killed him before he managed to kill me.
I mean, this is probably the most horrific story in the history of heavy metal.
We believe the concept of Satan to be the archetype of defiance and pride and revolt, but a beautiful object.
You can't play with the devil's tools without paying the devil's price.
I felt that I was losing my son.
We embrace life. That's why we so closely embrace death.
People should try and jump off this hysteria. Some of the music is really worth listening to.
They are openly professing, to some extent, to being anti-Christian and having values that some would claim to be abhorrent.
If it's just a laugh, it turned very, very serious.
These weren't apple pie munching, flag waving, Bible reading, well-behaved school kids who one day sold their soul to the devil. Right? They're just like looking around for ways to make mummy and daddy go, oh my God.
And fear and chaos is something to be relished as well as love and pride.
Why should I regret preserving my own life?
It's all about strength and power and control, and that's what comes across in the music.
Evil has a smell that is all its own.
If it's just a laugh, it turned very, very serious.
Black metal is an extreme form of heavy metal based on loud, fast, orchestrally inspired music with heavily satanic, paganistic slanted lyrics.
Live with the fact that they're wrong, that there is no truth in God, trick or betrayed.
Existence on the other side, growing circles of grief and pain, slides across the land as an omen of the horror yet to come.
Heavy metal's always had the satanic image attached to it, and a lot of people over the years who don't understand heavy metal have said they're preaching and practicing Satanism, they're corrupting the youth. Most heavy metal fans, I'm sure over the years, and certainly the bands, knew it was image, it was fun, it was no more serious or corrupting than the Hammer horror film or a Universal Frankenstein movie. These days, there are bands singing about Satan, and they're actually putting their beliefs into the songs. Not all bands, but there are some who genuinely believe what they sing about.
We're mainly a very dark, gothic kind of band. We like graveyards, graveyards are very haunting and evocative. There is a seminal kind of apathy towards the church, but that's just natural for our kind of music. We're the devil's music, after all.
It's me that is important, not Satan, because I express myself through the symbols of Satan. In many ways, you could say, maybe I am Satan, or the powers I deal with are Satan.
Most black metal bands have a vocalist who sounds like Scooby-Doo on acid.
It's a frightful row, to be honest. I mean, would the devil be that obvious? Would the devil really talk like this? I don't think so.
And with most of those bands that you get these days, it's just all about face paint and inverted crosses and image, and it's just to make money because that's the trend right now, and they just haven't got any talent.
With a good black metal band, you can put it on and just shut your eyes and almost think you're sort of 600 years ago going into a battle, like with swords and shields flying around all over the place and that sort of thing. Just, I don't know, it's just music that comes from the heart, I suppose.
Well, the concerts are the big letdown, because you look at these album sleeves, and they're usually painted for obvious reasons. There's these hugely muscled, demonic monsters and cathedrals of skulls, and you think, yeah, sort of like Spielberg, and sort of like lights coming up and dripping blood and whatever, and you go along to this gig, there's like 100 crusty-type gothy people sort of stinking of patchouli there, and this band come on, weedy little pale emaciated bodies because they've been too devilly to work out, because, you know, the devil does not pump iron. They've got these like crappy little costumes on made out of Baco foam, the inside of Sugar Puffs packets. So the audience basically, it's the same at a rave or any rock gig. They're off their faces on whatever they can afford, usually cheap lager, jumping up and down and trying to trance out to music which has a repetitive beat, which is what it's all about, really.
If you came to one of our concerts, you would see a gothic element, a theatrical stage presence. We use smoke and candelabra and vivid backdrops and special lighting techniques to give that ethereal presence to the stage.
Getting on stage, we feel more like we're going to do a dangerous sport. It's like we're going to go and do this to the best of our abilities, and it's going to hurt, and your fingers are going to bleed, and you're going to have cracked knuckles and this kind of thing. And it's got its price. And we draw a lot of power from the crowd. You sit in the car afterwards. I will sit in the car afterwards, and my hands are shaking, and my muscles are like having a spasm, and your fingers are bleeding. You think, what the hell did I do that for?
The image of the bands on stage is very much based on dark clothing and silly makeup, and it is silly makeup. They look like Kiss with paint boxes, paint by numbers. Most of the bands seem to think that they have to go on stage with this demonic makeup because it's part of the image.
It can be very chaotic. We have quite a bit of violence at our show, but I think it just adds to the atmosphere. The atmosphere that is created sums up the moniker that we've adopted as a band, Cradle of Filth, supreme vampiric evil.
They have this self-image which must be protected at all times. It must be an awful strain on the poor lambs, because in reality, probably at school they were called Specky or Spacky, and the girls used to beat them up with their skipping ropes. So they finally leave school and think, right, from now on, I'm going to do everything my way.
My name is Stephen Wells. I spent 10 years being a rock journalist for the NME, the world's biggest selling weekly music publication, covering all facets of rock and popular music, but especially concentrating on censorship, satanic metal, death metal, and other things too disgusting to be allowed into the house of any self-respecting parents. Black metal it's about basically worshipping the dev. It's about sort of like singing songs of praise to the devil in a voice which sounds like sort of Muttley on steroids over very fast-fashion guitars. And the people who actually invented this sound were a band called Venom from Newcastle. We're talking now late 70s. And the sound they arrived at, which is basically like that, was owed a lot to what was happening in hardcore punk in the States.
Fight, we will fight, right, living low in a world of our own. Destined to live right when taking hell's own. Burning lives, burning, asking me for the mercy of God. Ancient cries crying, acting fast on the way of the dog. Welcome to hell. Welcome to hell. Welcome to hell.
My name's Abbadon. I'm the drummer with a band called Venom. We're an English band. We tend to play a lot of very heavy music to a lot of very interested people outside of this country.
Venom, I suppose, were the first band to actually come along and say, we are Satanists, we are blah, blah. And they denied it since, but I actually think that because the working class boys, it was kind of a bit naughty, and they did sort of like go and drink inside on the tombstones on a night.
Burning life, burning, and keep on the mercy of God. Ancient cries crying, acting fast on the way of the dog. Welcome to hell. Welcome to hell. Welcome to
received letters and this kind of thing saying, you know, you shouldn't be doing this, we kind of looked at it pretty philosophically, because my parents didn't want me listening to the Rolling Stones, so we kind of hide the albums and sneak them in, and the kids are hiding Venom albums and sneaking them in. If the parents don't want them listening to Venom, then take the record off them. If you let the kid go out and buy albums and listen to them and be influenced by them, then it's your fault, not mine. When the kid's at school, it's a teacher's fault. If the kid's getting up to something when he's home, it's your fault. It's never my fault. If you don't want the kid to come and see Venom, stop them coming to the gig. Don't let them buy the ticket. You won't be able to, but that's your job as a parent.
My name is Malcolm Dome. I'm a music journalist, and I've been writing about black metal since the genesis of the whole genre, which goes back to 1980. There are definitely two styles of black metal. The old school of black metal was definitely born with Venom and subsequently Merciful Fate and bands of that ilk, and it was more based in traditional heavy metal, and the satanic imagery of the music was definitely hammer horror. It was image and no more, really. The new school of black metal, I think, are more influenced by the later bands of the 80s, the death metal genre. And they've taken the whole lyrical slant of black metal and widened it a little bit to take in more political views, and some of them actually have very strongly held political and religious beliefs.
I think the only place where it has become dangerous is in Scandinavia, where the line between the satanic rock scene and the Nazi right is, well, it's not there anymore.
97 to 99 FM, Radio 1, Newsbeat.
Murder, church burning and devil worship, all performed in the name of black metal in Norway. Its satanic message has been taken to an extreme, and one of the movement's biggest names has been jailed for 21 years for the murder of a rival musician and for burning down 3 churches. Varg Vikernes, alias Count Grishnak, and leader of the band Burzum, stabbed to death Hieronymus from the band Mayhem at his Oslo flat. The fight is thought to be the outcome of a power struggle between Norway's 2 most extreme black metal musicians who want overall control of the nation's satanic inner circle. At his trial, Vikernes said, "Through church-burning black metal music will reawaken the Norwegians' feelings of belonging to Odin, god of Norse myth."
My name is Varg Vikernes, and I play in Burzum. Burzum means either darkness or light, depending on how you see it, really. Like as if you're a Christian, it probably means darkness, right? And if you're a pagan, it means the light. I have no regrets preserving my own life. It's really simple. Big point is that the guy I killed intended to kill me. So I killed him before he managed to kill me. He tried, but he failed, miserably. Obviously, he's dead. So why should I regret preserving my own life? I regret one thing, though, that I didn't kill the other fellow as well, because he turned me into the police.
There was a group called the Inner Circle out in Norway. Very shadowy group. No one really knew who was in the Inner Circle because no one would talk about it, but it was claimed to be a hierarchy of black metal musicians dedicated to arson attacks on churches, anti-Christian propaganda, to creating the turmoil they felt would bring about the sort of revolution that they want.
My name is Rolfe Rasmussen, and I am the assistant pastor of this Asane church, which was burnt down in an act of arsonage motivated by Satanist leanings.
Norwegian police have arrested 2 satanic sympathizers for an attempted arson attack on a church near the capital Oslo. There have now been 34 arsons at churches in the country. They've been linked to a particular strand of black metal music with an anti-Christian message. Black metal musicians have often made the headlines recently after murder, suicide and a series of church attacks allegedly connected to their music.
was quiet on the day before Christmas Eve. The organist had left at 11, finishing after his last rehearsals. Everything was quiet in the church, while in many homes people were still preparing for Christmas. At night, suddenly people who were up started to notice flames coming from the side of the church. They called for the firemen, they called for the vicar, and he alerted the rest of us who were in the staff. I got a call at about 2:30 a.m. So I got dressed and of course drove quickly to the church. It's not very far. And as I came up the hill, I saw what I dreaded to see, yet now expected: flames billowing up from the church building. And as I got out into the air, I also noticed this acrid smell coming all over. It was not a festive bonfire, it was the heritage of ages going up into dust. There were a general outrage in the population of Bergen at this burning. There were suspicions that there could be Satanist connection because half a year earlier, one of the most prized churches of Bergen had gone up into flames. And there you had found indications that maybe there had been animal offerings connected to the burning. Obviously, the pastors were not the only ones who were horrified. The congregations took it even harder, some of them, especially the older members. And they said to each other, how can a person do such a thing? He must be deranged, he must be mad. But the first regular service, we had a march bearing torches all the way from there and up to the site of the church, where the vicar gave a commemoration speech saying that we should not only be defiant to such acts, but we should also remember that even though a building has been burnt down, the true Church of God cannot be burnt down because it consists of people. We had to carry on and show him that this was not the way to stop Christianity.
There have been criminal activities over the last few years that are directly linked to black metal musicians. To some extent, there are people claiming to have been involved in arson attacks or any of these despicable acts simply because they think it gave them a certain amount of credibility. And I use the word in the past tense simply because since Grishnak was convicted, I think a lot of black metal musicians have suddenly thought to themselves, we're not doing our music any good here. We're not really doing the genre any good here, and they've started to distance themselves from all this activity and not change their views but dilute them, making themselves slightly more diplomatic and slightly more acceptable to the masses.
Title track, made on CD, do you pay or joy?
I'm Paul from the band Lust of Files. We've just finished our set at the Devil's Church at the George Robey in London. Black metal is a belief that is expressed through music to corrupt the youth of today. It is a mouthpiece through which we can exercise our beliefs and get it into the public eye.
My
Right, I'm Tina Ritchie.
Radio 1. More music.
Norway's notorious black metal crime wave has hit Britain. 4 men have each been given 2.5 years in prison after a series of attacks on Kent churches. Maidstone Crown Court was told how the churches were desecrated and graveyards smashed up in the anti-Christian attacks. The wrecking spree caused £100,000 worth of damage. The prosecution alleged the 4 had become involved in black metal music, which had a satanic background. The men were inspired by the belief that Christian churches were built on pagan sites, and it was their responsibility to redress the balance and reclaim them.
Well, I'm Veronica Tims, mother of one of the boys who's been involved in the black metal and death metal music scene. For 2 or 3 years, my son had always been interested in the music. He was into heavy metal music. And by and large, many people did not seem to think that this was a problem. Then he moved into a more extreme type of music, black metal. And I became more and more concerned because I was beginning to notice changes in my son's behavior, his attitude. And he was becoming more withdrawn. He was becoming more obsessed with this brand of music.
In Britain, we've been fortunate in a number of black metal related crimes is very, very small, but even one's too many. And the most famous is the case of a band called Necropolis from Kent, who desecrated a graveyard and were eventually tried and convicted on that crime, and they're currently serving prison terms. There is no doubt about it that this band saw themselves as a black metal band and saw their way of creating and then generating interest is to copy what happened in Norway to prove they were real black metal. In doing so, they proved nothing of the sort whatsoever, I don't think.
I used to try and reason with him to say, well, look, Paul, where is this leading to? You know, this negativity. You're sleeping with this negativity. He had in his room all the different cuttings like youngsters do, but it was negative. It was like death, entombed, sepulchre, cannibal corpse, the grave, and he'd have a sepulchre. I mean, it was tragic.
Maybe just we can pretend it's alright. What's the price I pay?
4 men have each been given 2.5 years in prison after a series of attacks on Kent churches. Maidstone Crown Court was told how the churches were desecrated and graveyards smashed up in the anti-Christian attacks.
If it's just a laugh, it turned very, very serious. And serious enough that it produced negative thoughts, feelings, attitudes, reactions. Negative enough to be destructive. Negative enough to draw people in perhaps into doing something which they wouldn't otherwise do.
Bewitched you. Because of this general feeling of evil being what black metal stands for, a lot of impressionable black metal kids might think that they have to prove themselves to be part of this whole genre, and it's has been encouraged by a lot of the musicians who said, yes, you want to be part of us, you have to prove yourself worthy, you have to prove that you are capable of these acts, and you're not just weak-minded followers. Unfortunately, some of the fans have gone beyond that and have got caught up in a web that they don't understand and can't control, and extremity becomes part of the lifestyle, and you're suddenly into throwing fire bombs at people or setting matches alight in churches or whatever.
My name's Diamanda and I run the British label Misanthropy Records. Well, I think black metal is so popular because kids got bored with death metal a long time ago, because death metal is nothing special anymore and just died. But like this new breed of black metal, they are exciting, they seem dangerous to many people, they burnt down churches, they even went as far as killing people. And I think a lot of kids are just attracted to that because they want always to be more and more extreme.
I think it can just happen to anyone. Here were young lads, they were interested in the music. Now, some may go into that genre of music, others go into other types of music, which has other connotations. But it was unsuspecting, it was subtle. So therefore, they went into it quite innocently, maybe in the first instance, without anything of the occult. They went into the occult. They were normal boys, they went along to the gigs, so they were indoctrinated. What made four normal, creative boys who had everything going for them, leading normal lives, and suddenly they become morose, depressive, enter into this depressive music. And ultimately, if you're tapping into negativity, what does it do? Depression leads on to ultimately suicide, self-destructive force.
My name is Dr. Judy Edworthy. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Plymouth, and I have research interests in many aspects of sound, including the effects of music. These lyrics are clearly quite extreme, and I think in the hands of an impressionable young person, especially an adolescent, I think they could be quite damaging. These words basically instill hatred in various groups of people, and it's not untypical of, Germany in the 30s or any kind of movement that tries to whip up hatred of people just because of what they are. That's not to say that I would ever blame music directly for anything that anybody did. It's a question of that person taking on the responsibility. But I do think they're very strongly worded lyrics. It's really an issue for a censor, I would have thought.
If you go along to a concert, and you get excited and crazy and mad, then what comes off the stage can actually influence your thoughts. There's no doubt about it.
But I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people try to blame the music for what happened. These are the actions of a few individuals and has nothing to do with music as such. And I remember a case in England where a few churches got vandalized from some kids. And there was this group of parents that tried to stop black metal being imported into England, and they just blamed the whole black metal music. But it's absolutely ridiculous because music is music and can't really influence people to go down and burn churches.
I mean, you have to ask yourself a but-for question. If you say, but for this music, would people be setting fire to churches and things like that? Now, the answer to that clearly is no, because if it hadn't been for the exposure to this particular thing, the idea may never have entered their head. Now, that doesn't excuse them from doing it at all. I mean, because we can all listen to things and see things that we don't like. We don't have to go then to do them.
I'd be very silly to say that I didn't imagine that the stuff that we were writing and the lyrical content of the songs were going to have an influence on people. But the thing that we firmly believed when we were writing this is that it's up to the individual to make a conscious decision. If these people in Norway, the black metal bands in Norway who are burning churches and committing murder or whatever, I have to defend their conscious decision to the right to do that.
Once upon the ground,
Christianity is a very establishment figure. Jesus is a very establishment figure. And part of the reason why Jesus has been attacked, I think, is because of the way he's revered by the world. And by attacking him, it creates a bit of sensationalism and shocks. And kids always want to shock the older generation in some way or another. There's no point attacking the government because everyone does it across the board. There's just no reason. But if you attack Christianity, you're attacking something that gets to the very core of our society, and it makes you seem like a real rebel and revolutionary.
Impaled crucifixion, compassion forgot, eternal damnation once upon the cross. Blasphemy laughs at thee, Jesus, you've been deceived. It's very sad that someone has to write about someone who is very dear to me and whom I revere.
You've been deceived, struggling on the road, gagging to breathe. Despite your God-twisted wine, you will retreat by the angel of light. Once upon the cross.
They are openly professing, to some extent, to being anti-Christian and having values that some would claim to be abhorrent.
You have spat in God's face. You have spat in God's face.
I'm Alex Maloney, and for the last 10 years I've been looking at black metal music and its effects on people who listen to it. Within black metal, you've got varying degrees of believers. There are those who openly admit that they are followers of Satanism, as in a belief in the character of Satan, the power of Satan, the influence of Satan. Various artists have expressed their spirituality through their music, and what we've seen in black metal is people who have believed a spiritual force or a spiritual character and have wanted to put that into a type of music which expresses their feelings. And Satanism is all about power. It's all about strength and power and control. And that's what comes across in the music.
Jesus, set me free.
Demonic possession is an obsession.
I mean, would the devil be that obvious? Would the devil really talk like this? I don't think so.
You have your Bibles, please turn to Luke chapter 8, verse 26, as we begin today a series on Satanism and hell. Today and for the next 2 Sundays, I'm going to systematically and scripturally expose Satan's kingdom and his absolute and consuming desire to destroy you, to destroy your marriage, to destroy your health, to destroy your children, to destroy your peace of mind, to destroy your finances, and most of all, to destroy your eternal soul.
As a follower of Satanism, you draw off what that character or that personality will allow you to. If you channel the energy, you can make things happen in your life. So therefore, if somebody is in your way, you can direct and channel the energy to move them out of your way, so that you are the sole beneficiary. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Within that concept is a total denial of anybody or anything else. I accept that God created man, gave him life, gave him the spirit. Those people are totally denying that God even exists, let alone that he has any influence in their lives. So again, as a Christian, I would have to say that's a totally wrong attitude to have, because you're cutting God out completely and you're putting yourself in a very, very vulnerable position.
Dareside are one of the more interesting bands in the genre, because when Dareside first came about, firstly they had a leader in Glenn Benton who's very charismatic and openly satanic, claimed to be a satanic worshipper. And secondly, they made a big impact by claiming very early on that they were all going to commit suicide before their 33rd birthday, because none of them wanted to live to 33 when Jesus died. So they were determined to make this sort of sensational sacrifice. As the years have gone by, they've mellowed a little bit and claimed they were misrepresented. But Glenn Benton himself still claims to have satanic beliefs. He is the man who did burn an inverted cross into his forehead, and they and he are seen as being leaders of the genre by a lot of people.
Dareside have a spiritual creed, which is that by promoting Satanism and waging war on the Holy Ghost, that they will reign in hell next to the devil. Now, this band actually believe if a bass guitar goes missing on the road, that's the Holy Ghost now to get them. If their plane flies through a thunderstorm, that's the Holy Ghost trying to kill them. And they pray to the devil when these things happen.
My name's Audrey Harper, some of you might know me. And in my younger days, I was actually a black witch. And for those who don't understand that, that is actually devil worship, the same as the Satanists. I've heard people say that they're Satanists, but they don't believe in the devil. And that is a contradiction. I mean, Satanism means that you worship Satan. If you don't believe in him, it means that your religion isn't real. And that worries me, because those sort of people who don't believe it but just do it because it's the in thing are probably the ones at risk. While they think that they're playing this game of being a Satanist, they're opening their minds to a lot of black art, a lot of black craft that can eventually take them over.
People have said, are you Satanists? And we would say yes in a kind of way, but no, we're more misanthropist based. We have dark beliefs. This is the way we were made.
My name is Ihsahn and I play in a Norwegian band called Emperor. People talking about what Satanism actually is. It's kind of hard to say, because it's about the individual, and all Satanists would have individual opinions on what Satanism is. It's basically everything I deal with. It is a way of thinking, and a way of creating, and a way of living.
To live in shadow, you can see the light and begin to appreciate its worth in relation to where you are. To live solely in light is to be blinded by it.
If you open your mind for long enough to evil, it will have a way of creeping up on you, and you will not be able to control it. Evil has a smell that is all its own. And when you really get involved in the very deepest aspects of evil, I'm talking about anything. Evil is selfish, and I can have all the power I want, but it means squashing everybody else to do it. Evil is about murder. Evil is about the rape of people's lives and their emotions. The smell of sitting in a group with black candles burning and watching things coming up through the floorboard, it is scary. And it is dangerous. I'm only alive today because God is bigger. Because when I'd been involved for a little while in this group, I just wanted to die. And the problem is that once you get caught up in it, you can't just walk away. The sad thing with evil is that parts of it excite you. The promise of power, the promise that you can do away with those you don't like, the promises that you can make someone fall in love with you. So part of it excites you, and you try to switch off the parts that disgust you, but you can't, they're intermingled, it's the same master.
Yeah, my name is Kian Remme. I'm a pastor belonging to the Church of Norway, but I have a special function. We are working among our poor people, our drug addicts, young people who have different problems and so on. According to a Satanist way of thinking, death is a positive step. And we have seen, one of the lyrics from one of our local bands here, we're talking about who of us will be the first one to dare voluntary to cross this line, go over and die. And one of them actually did commit suicide and left a note saying that now I am there, and now you must envy me, since I really dare take this step into the arms of the devil and so on, into the dark.
That's why we so closely embrace death. Through death we appreciate life ever so more deeply.
For some of the ritual Satanists, you could say that death is passing over to eternity, where the strongest will prevail, which again is the opposite of the Christian gospel. The idea is that God is always there, especially with the poor people, to lift them up. This is, according to ritual Satanists, this would be a sign of weakness.
Everybody grow weak. And I will as well, unless I die before I grow weak. But we have a very good example in paganism, just on this, because Odin himself, he grew weak, he got sick. And instead of dying of disease and lying in the bed for some years, he hanged himself. And that is how we shall do it. If we grow weak, go and hang yourself.
Sword in hand at the bloody fields of history, we rend our blades through dogma and humility, carve the future according to our will, set worlds ablaze with our seething fire. Let you all acknowledge that we are here, as masters to rule this failing humanity, our beings formed in rage and defiance, with strength to trample the weak and the foolish. And so we march with burning brands, temples of flame, and our path to glory.
think the only place where it has become dangerous is in Scandinavia, where the line between the satanic rock scene and the Nazi right is, well, it's not there anymore. But if these kids are Nazis, then the problem is Nazism. It's not satanic rock music.
The sad thing about black metal music is the way that the music itself is being used to manipulate very naive people. I'm not saying all bands. There are some bands who are using their music to get across beliefs in the hope that this will trigger some sort of political uprising. One particular example that occurs to me is Fenris of Darkthrone, whom I had a long chat to a few years ago when the whole arson attacks on the church started to raise its ugly head, and he openly said that he would like to raise an army of black metal fans who would burn churches, completely destroy liberal and democratic society, and establish the old order, and what he saw as being the old dark ages of Satanism versus Christianity. And they actually have gone on stage and preached a very neo-fascist outlook that Scandinavia should be pure for pure Scandinavians.
When we got to study some of the lyrics from this band, we got very concerned, very worried. They were talking about the old Nordic religions and all these things, but behind it, we believe we saw very clearly a fascist ideology in a religious disguise.
Fenris himself claims to be a fascist, openly says he has Nazi sympathies. Now, I find it very sad that coming from a person who lives at home with his parents. And I did actually challenge him because he said basically there will be casualties in this war, and I put a hypothetical question to him. Supposing that people who objected to what you believed in attacked and burnt your home and killed your parents, how would you react? And his sad answer was, there will be casualties of war.
If you study fascist ideology, you find that the view on the human being is advocating the strong human being. It's despising the weak human. Could be, alcoholics, homosexuals, and so on. All these things you will find in fascist ideology, that it's a great blonde Aryan, a Nordic kind of type, which is the ideal for fascism. Also, they advocate war. They consider war as some kind of purifying, strengthening kind of experience, which is good. If you move away from the political language and look into a kind of way of expressing this in a spiritual way, you will find that Satanism is the religious expression of fascism, as I see it.
Put the strong over the weak is not extreme at all, I think. It's quite obvious. If you watch the animal life, the weak animals die. And if some animal is weak, the pack leave it. The weak shall die and give room to new, stronger individuals. I don't love anything weak. Of course, children are weak when they are children, but of course they grow strong. Old people are weak when they are old, and I would encourage them to just walk into the woods to die.
Nothing just past the mind of unbelievers in the form of unholiness. Deception is not one, but unaware of the death that will take
there is an extreme musical form that gets in the press and is sensationalized by elements of the press, there's going to be a lobby that wants it banned or censored. It's been going on for years and years and years. Normally you can dismiss those people by saying, well, what crime has been committed related to this music? And over the years we've had the famous court cases in America with Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest, with families of kids who sadly committed suicide trying to prove that they were goaded into it by the music of Priest or Ozzy, who are satanic. And that's easy to dismiss because that's nonsense, and it's easily provable to be nonsense, and has been. Now we're in a situation where there is a lobby to try and ban black metal music across the board because it encourages antisocial behaviour. And whilst that antisocial behaviour is going on, it makes it more difficult to defend it. Although I would say it's still a small minority who go out and generate those sort of behavioural patterns, who go out and burn churches. It's not done by everyone at a black metal gig.
We want to ask government to help us parents. We're doing what we can by raising the issues of this evil, destructive, negative, extreme music.
I'm Mary Antoniades. I co-run Dual Edge Records. We sell music by Christian artists of all styles, ranging from traditional right through to doom metal. I can understand the position of parents who would want to have black metal music banned, simply because they would want to protect their children from negative influence. But at the same time, I think banning is probably an extreme form of preventing their children from listening to it, because at the end of the day, it would still be obtainable under black market, to coin a phrase, underground sources. So they won't be successful. So I don't think it should be banned, because by banning it also, it would make it a more attractive musical form for kids to want to listen to.
But I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people try to blame the music for what happened. These are the actions of a few individuals and has nothing to do with music as such. And I remember a case in England where a few churches got vandalized from some kids. And there was this group of parents that tried to stop black metal being imported into England, and they just blamed the whole black metal music. But it's absolutely ridiculous, because music is music and can't really influence people to go down and burn churches.
Are we going to let a bunch of fundamentalist Christians let us know what will and will not be banned? We're all being bloody acrylic listening to Cliff Richard. Let's just say we all agree that there's these hideous, extreme, cutting-edge Satanist bands that can't do any good for people, and they're a dangerous influence on our kids, and we should ban them. Now, the problem is that if you let that kind of agenda be set by people who actually believe in a physical devil with horns and a tail who's going to come, the medieval mumbo jumbo, basically, then as happened in certain places in the United States of America, you're going to get them banning The Wizard of Oz because it contains witches. You're going to get them banning Halloween. You're going to get them banning Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to end up with just the Bible, and if it's not in the Bible, it must be the work of the devil. Yeah, basically, I think there should be censorship, but it should be me that does it.
And it's offensive to many people's beliefs and values.
If any group of people or organisations incite violence against another group of people or organisations, I would ban them, because violence in itself is wrong. However, the paradox is we live in a democratic society, and we must not take away people's freedom of speech, even though that speech might be violent or aggressive.
People are always going to look for something more extreme. So when this black metal wave dies down, which is going to happen very soon because it's absolutely overcrowded, that whole scene with shitty bands, then I wonder what the next thing will be, what is going to be more extreme than black metal.
Even if you don't believe in God, I mean, it's terrible to see that somebody is actually giving himself to forces within us as human beings, which are the darkest side of us. We see it in you know, how the Serbs have been treating Muslims in Bosnia. These are the kind of practical expressions of what happens to a person who gives his life to these powers. Definitely, man is capable of giving his life to the dark forces inside himself.
I was powerless. So therefore, I prayed to my God, my Lord. And I have seen the results, as others did. We feel we've got our sons back. One of the youngsters said, it was like, now he's come out of it, it was like being in a black hole. And my son, it's just lovely to feel that I've got him back. I've got him back in his spiritual state.
The Flames and the Claims, the story of black metal, was a religious programmes production for Radio 1.
If you'd like to find out more about some of the issues raised in this programme, you can call the Radio 1 helpline now. Practical advice and information is free, confidential and available on 0800 110 100. That's 0800 110 100.